The challenge, the arena smelled of blood, oil, and hot metal. Bright lights shone down on the smooth black floor. Around the circular pit, thousands of alien spectators cheered and laughed, their voices mixing into a storm of noise. This was the Arena of Kazreen, the deadliest battleground in the entire galactic dominion. It was a place where warriors fought not just for glory, but for survival. If you lost, you didn't go home. You went into the ground. Every species in the galaxy knew this place. And today, the crowd was excited for a new show. A strange challenger had stepped forward. A human. He was tall for his kind, with short, brown hair and dark, cold eyes. Scars covered his arms and neck. His clothes were simple. No armor, no helmet, just a black vest, combat pants, and boots. His name was Dax Mercer, and he walked into the arena like a man with nothing left to lose. On the other side of the pit stood Commander Veltari of the Zarn Dominion. She was over 7 feet tall, with green-scaled skin, sharp yellow eyes, and claws like knives. Her armor was silver and red, made from the bones of creatures she had killed. She had fought in hundreds of battles and won them all. Veltari looked at Dax and laughed. Not a small laugh, a loud, cruel one. Her voice echoed across the arena. "This is your champion?" she said, turning to the crowd. "This soft pink creature with no claws, no teeth? This is the best the humans have to offer." The crowd roared with laughter. Some aliens threw food, some hissed, and others shouted bets on how fast the human would die. Dax didn't speak. He just stared at her, calm and quiet. His hands were loose at his sides. His eyes didn't blink. Veltari stepped forward, grinning. "I will make this quick," she growled. "No weapons, no tricks, just you and me. Let the galaxy see what your kind is made of." Dax finally spoke. His voice was low, quiet, but somehow everyone heard it. "I'm not here to win," he said. "I'm here to teach you fear." The laughter stopped. For a few seconds, the arena went silent. Even Veltari stopped smiling. The announcer, a floating drone with glowing red eyes, flew into the center of the pit. "Combatants ready?" it asked. Veltari cracked her neck and raised her claws. "Ready." Dax rolled his shoulders once and nodded. "Ready? Begin." The drone flew up and away. The crowd leaned forward in their seats. Veltari charged. She moved like a missile, fast and powerful. Her claws were out, her teeth bared. She was ready to crush the human in one blow. But Dax wasn't where she thought he'd be. He stepped to the side, smooth and easy. Her claws missed by inches. Before she could turn, Dax moved. His hand struck her neck, just a light hit, but it made her stumble. Veltari spun around, growling. Her eyes were wide. That hit wasn't strong, but it had found a weak spot. She hadn't expected that. Dax didn't smile. He just stood there watching her. Veltari growled louder. "You think that was something?" she shouted. "I've killed monsters twice your size." She charged again. This time she swung faster. Claws slashed the air. Her tail whipped around behind her, but Dax moved like water. He ducked under. Her arm slipped around her side, struck her in the side of the knee. Veltari fell to one leg, roaring in anger. The crowd didn't laugh anymore. Some of them stood up. A few began to whisper, "Is he winning? No, he can't be. He's just a human." He dodged her again. Look at that." Dax stepped back, breathing steady. His hands were still open. He hadn't used a single weapon. Veltari stood up slowly. Her eyes burned with hate. "You dare make a fool of me in front of the galaxy?" she shouted. Dax met her gaze. His voice was cold as steel. "You made the mistake," he said. "You thought humans were weak. You thought we were afraid, but we're not like your enemies. We don't run, we don't beg, and we don't break." Veltari roared and rushed again, but this time the fear had started to grow inside her, and the crowd could feel it too. This fight wasn't going to be a quick joke. It was going to be a lesson. The laughing Queen Commander Veltari had always known what fear looked like. She had seen it in the eyes of broken soldiers, in the screams of dying enemies, in the trembling hands of those who begged for mercy before she cut them down. Fear was her language, her currency, her favorite weapon. She wore it like a cloak and breathed it like air. The battlefield was her throne, and she ruled it without question. But this was something new. As she circled the human, blood pounding in her ears, something itched at the back of her mind. It wasn't fear. Not yet. It was confusion. And confusion, to a warrior like her, was a poison that spread quickly. Dax wasn't fighting the way she expected. He wasn't trying to overpower her, wasn't relying on size or brute force. No, he was using timing, movement, precision. He moved like a predator, not a prey animal, not like the soft, fragile things she had seen in human broadcasts. This wasn't a diplomat or a scientist. This was a killer wearing a human face. Still, she told herself, this wasn't over. Not even close. She had survived worse than this. She was Veltari the Unbroken, first claw of the Blood Suns, daughter of a warlord and a conqueror of 9 systems. Her armor wasn't just for show. It had been forged in the fire of a dead planet, cooled in the blood of her enemies, and she wasn't about to be embarrassed by a furless ape with old scars and a bad attitude. She straightened her spine, rolled her shoulders, and grinned again. It wasn't a friendly grin. It was the kind that showed teeth, the kind that meant pain was coming. "You fight well," she said, circling him slowly. "But I wonder how long that clever footwork will last, when your bones start to break." Dax didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on her, calm and unreadable. He wasn't even breathing hard. That silence, his refusal to rise to her taunts, annoyed her more than she expected. She was used to fear, to panic, to rage. But this man gave her nothing. It was like fighting a ghost. Around them, the crowd was starting to shift. The noise had changed. No more laughter, no more cheers for her. Now there was tension, questions, doubt. Someone near the front muttered, "Why isn't he scared of her?" A childlike alien with 6 eyes asked, "Is he even human?" Veltari heard it all. She wanted to roar at them, to remind them who she was. But she knew better than to let anger blind her. She had trained for this, fought beasts 10 times stronger than this creature. She just needed to stop playing games. She lunged again, fast and fierce, claws slashing toward his chest. This time she didn't aim for a killing blow. She wanted to hurt him, make him bleed, make him scream. But again, Dax moved. Not far, not flashy, just enough. He leaned back, her claws missed by inches, and he stepped into her guard. A hard palm struck her rib, not enough to break it, but close. Veltari gasped, not in pain, but in shock. He'd hit a weak spot under her armor. He knew where to strike. That wasn't luck. That was training. She leapt back, breathing harder now. Not tired, angry, frustrated. He wasn't just fast. He was studying her, learning her, like he had done this 100 times before. "I hope you enjoyed that," she hissed, "because I'm done playing." But even as she said it, something had shifted inside her. A tiny seed of doubt. She had come into this arena expecting to dominate, to perform, to crush a lesser being for the amusement of the masses. Now she was on defense, and the crowd could feel it. In the stands, a Zarn elder shook his head. "He's inside her head, already." A tall insectoid warrior leaned forward. She made the mistake of mocking him before she understood him. Down below, Dax took one slow step forward. "Here's what you don't understand," he said, his voice steady. "You've seen our diplomats, our colonies, our weakness. But you haven't met the ones who walk away from peace, the ones they send in when peace fails." Veltari's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he replied, "I'm not the best we have. I'm just the first one you're going to meet." And then, for the first time in her long, brutal life, Veltari realized she might be in real danger, not just from his strength, but from what he represented. Humanity hadn't come here to impress anyone. They had come to remind the galaxy what they were capable of. And the galaxy wasn't ready. First blood. There is a moment just before a fight turns deadly when time slows. The crowd feels it first. That hush, that flicker of something shifting, like the air itself is waiting, not cheering, not breathing, just watching. That moment had arrived. Veltari didn't know it yet, but the fight had already changed. She still thought she could win by force, by speed, by crushing the man before her into the floor of the arena. She still believed that the weakness of his body meant the weakness of his will. But Dax knew better, because for him this wasn't just about the fight. It wasn't about the arena or the audience. It wasn't about glory or pride or even survival. It was about the message. He moved first. No roar, no shout, just motion, clean and terrifying in its calm. His boots slid over the arena floor, and in less than a second he closed the distance. Veltari blinked. She hadn't expected that kind of speed. Not from him. He didn't aim for her head. He didn't swing wild. He stepped inside her reach and struck her elbow joint. A precise, brutal jab with 2 fingers. A human might have felt it like a pinch, but Zarn nerves ran differently. Pain bloomed fast and sharp up her arm. She snarled and slashed downward. Her claws grazed the edge of his vest, but he had already moved, dancing to the side, not out of reach, but just outside her control. Then he twisted, dropped low, and drove his elbow into the back of her knee. That one made her stagger. The crowd gasped. And now, the silence that followed wasn't out of boredom. It was fear. Veltari stumbled, backward, one leg faltering for just a second. Her thick armor had absorbed some of the impact, but not enough. She was used to enemies attacking with wild rage or cautious defense. This was something else. Dax fought with the calm of someone who had already made peace with death. He didn't flinch when she roared. He didn't react when her claws missed him by inches. His eyes were locked onto her like a predator studying a wounded animal. No panic, no mercy. Veltari regained her footing. "You dare touch me like that?" she hissed. "I haven't even started," Dax replied. And he hadn't. He moved in again, and this time she was ready. At least she thought she was. She swung hard, claws aiming for his ribs, but he dipped low, spinning past her side. Before she could turn, he landed a solid strike into her lower back, just beneath the armor line. Pain flared up her spine. That one hurt. Veltari twisted, wild and furious, catching only the edge of his shoulder as he slipped away. Blood, red, and human, splattered onto the floor. Her claws had finally connected. A cheer rose from the crowd. She smiled. She wanted to see how long he could keep that blank, fearless face once he started losing pieces of himself. But Dax only looked at the cut on his shoulder, then at her. "You got in?" he said, almost conversational. "Good." And then he did, something she wasn't expecting. He smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just a slight, quiet smile. A knowing smile. It wasn't the smile of a man in danger. It was the smile of a man who had decided how the story ends. Veltari stepped back without meaning to. Her claws were still raised, her body still tense, but in that moment something inside her shifted. A memory returned, blurry, half forgotten, from the early days of the Zarn Wars. A battlefield on a human colony. The sky on fire. Her soldiers, laughing as the humans retreated. Until they didn't. Until the humans turned around, burned, broken, half dead, and started walking toward them. Not running. Walking. They had no hope of victory. No reason to fight, but they fought anyway. And it had taken everything to stop them. Veltari shook her head, snapping out of the memory. She roared and charged again, trying to silence the doubt in her chest. But doubt doesn't die easily. Especially when it's standing in front of you, bleeding calmly, daring you to come closer. The drone hovering above shouted, "First blood, Commander Veltari." The crowd cheered, but they were wrong, because the real first blood wasn't human. It was hers, and Dax knew it. He had drawn it with pressure points, cracked joints, and shattered pride. He wasn't fighting for his life. He was dissecting her, and he was only getting started. The human problem. There are enemies you fight with swords. There are enemies you fight with fear. And then there are enemies like Dax Mercer. Ones who do not come to win. They come to end illusions. Veltari had never faced one of those before. She was breathing harder now, not from exhaustion, but from something unfamiliar tightening around her lungs. She told herself it was rage, that this human had simply gotten lucky. A few sharp strikes, a trick of speed, a wound in her pride. That was all. But her instincts, honed through years of blood and battle, whispered something different. This wasn't luck. This was a problem. A human problem. She had seen their species before. Weak, chaotic, divided. Some smart, some stubborn, a few strong. But nothing she couldn't crush. Their diplomats were soft-spoken. Their soldiers used armor to hide behind. Their colonies fell faster than they could rebuild them. But Dax was something else. He wasn't hiding behind gear or bluster. He wasn't wasting movement. Every strike, every dodge, every word, measured, focused, surgical. She had expected to humiliate a man. Instead, she had stepped into the ring with a scalpel made of spite and war. She launched forward again, switching tactics, using her tail. This time, it whipped around like a hammer, slamming into the ground where Dax had been a second ago. Dust and debris flew into the air. He rolled, came up on one knee and countered. 2 quick jabs to her side, 1 to her lower abdomen. Soft spots, places where her armor overlapped. She snarled and spun, slashing. This time she caught the edge of his vest and tore it open, exposing more of his scarred chest. She saw now that he wasn't just some street brawler. He had the marks of war, of flame and blade, the kind that doesn't heal clean, the kind earned, not survived. He backed off again, breathing slow and steady. Blood trickled down his side, but his stance didn't change. I've studied your people, Veltari spat, circling him. You're undisciplined. You fight with emotion, rage, hope, weakness. Dax's expression didn't change. You studied the wrong ones. For the first time, the audience could hear it in his voice. Not arrogance, not even defiance, just act, and that was what made it terrifying. Veltari moved again, this time staying at a distance. She circled, calculating. Her claws flexed, but her mind was working now. He had made her think. She hated that. She needed to shift the rhythm, break his tempo. She leapt high, using her size and strength, aiming to crash down on him from above. Dax didn't dodge. He stepped into her fall. His shoulder slammed into her midair, knocking her trajectory off. She crashed into the arena floor hard enough to dent the metal. She roared, pushing herself up, but he was already there, already moving. An elbow to her throat, a knee into her shoulder socket, a palm strike under her jaw. 3 hits, precise, blinding. She reeled backward, coughing. A flicker of heat sparked. Behind her eyes, nausea, pain, confusion. The crowd had gone silent again. Not bored, uncertain, because they could see it now too. The pattern, the method. This wasn't a lucky human on a good day. This was training. Decades of it, and worse, he was holding back. On a luxury cruiser orbiting above the arena, a Tsar noble turned to his advisor. Why isn't she winning? The advisor's antennae twitched. Because he's not fighting her like an enemy. Then, what is he doing? The advisor hesitated, then said, he's breaking her. Back below, Veltari's knees touched the ground for just a moment. The arena had never seen her kneel before, not in all her fights, not in all her years. She rose quickly, snarling, but the audience had already seen it. So had Dax. He didn't press the attack. Not yet. He spoke, his voice low and cold. You rule with fear. I've seen species like yours before. You crush, you conquer. You believe that makes you strong. He stepped forward not as a fighter, but as something else, something older. But fear doesn't last. Fear rots. And when it's gone, There's only silence. That's when people remember what they really are. Veltari bared her fangs. And what are humans then? He looked at her, through her. Unfinished business. And now the whole galaxy was watching not a fight, but a warning. Turning point pain was nothing new to Commander Veltari. She had endured broken ribs in vacuum chambers, torn flesh under acid rain, and the slow burn of nerve poison running through her bloodstream during the siege of Velzar. She had survived it all and turned each scar into a story of dominance. Her enemies feared her not just because she killed, but because nothing could break her. Until now. Because this pain, this wasn't just in her bones. This was deeper. This was shame. She stood in the middle of the arena, blood leaking from the corner of her mouth, one eye swollen, one leg dragging slightly behind her. She had landed more blows now, yes, but each one had come at a cost. For every gash she carved into Dax, he gave her 3 in return. Not always visible, but each one exact, tactical, deliberate. And now the cheers she once commanded had gone still. The audience wasn't on her side anymore. They weren't laughing at the human. They were afraid of him. But not just afraid of Dax. Afraid of what he meant, because if one human could do this, how many more were out there? Veltari refused to give in. She bared her fangs, spit blood to the ground, and charged forward with a roar that made the arena tremble. No more subtlety, no more taunts, just brute force. Her claws tore through the air, and this time, they struck true, driving into Dax's side and sending him flying into the wall of the pit with a sickening crack. The sound echoed, and for a second everything paused. Dax slumped to the ground. Blood pooled beneath him. He didn't rise. The crowd gasped. Veltari panted chest, heaving, eyes wild. She stepped toward him slowly, cautiously. For the first time in this fight, it looked like victory might be hers. She raised her clawed hand. "It's over," she growled. "You fought well, for a human." But then, something moved. It started, small, a twitch, then a shift, and then, impossibly, the man began to rise, not with speed, not with drama, just determination. He pushed one hand against the wall, pulled himself upright, spine straightening 1 inch at a time. His left arm hung limp, possibly broken. His face was bruised, his mouth bloody. But his eyes were alive, not in pain, not in panic, in purpose. And that was when the arena truly fell silent. Even Veltari took a step back, her throat tightening. Dax wiped the blood from his mouth, coughed once, and said, "You don't win just because someone falls. You win when they stay down." He stepped forward, 1 step, then another, each movement slow, controlled, like a man pulling himself up from a grave. Veltari's voice cracked. "You should be unconscious." Dax looked at her, not with hate, not with rage, but with something worse, pity. "You thought we were weak because we bleed," he said. "But that's the problem with conquerors like you. You've never had to earn survival, you've only had to take it." Now his voice was rising, not to her, but to the thousands watching. "You want to know what makes us dangerous? It's not our ships, not our weapons, not even our numbers." He pointed to the arena floor, his blood staining the stone. "It's this. It's that we fall, and we get back up. Every time. We don't stop. We don't retreat. We endure." And suddenly the power dynamic shifted. The predator had become prey. Veltari lunged again, faster this time. Desperate. Reckless. But Dax wasn't there. He sidestepped, grabbed her wrist mid-swing, spun with the momentum, and drove his elbow into her jaw with a crack that sent a shockwave through the arena. She fell. Hard. She pushed herself up, dazed. Too slow. Dax was already moving, a knee to the ribs, a chop to the throat. She couldn't breathe. She lashed out wildly. He ducked, pivoted, and drove her face first into the wall she had once thrown him into. Dust filled the air. The crowd didn't cheer. They watched. Veltari sagged, coughing. Her claws scraped against the ground, weak, Her vision blurred, and Dax leaned in close, whispering, "Not for the crowd, just for her. You thought this was about dominance," he said. "But for my people, this is about survival. We fight because we have to. We bleed because we care, and we win because we refuse to die quietly." He stepped back, letting her fall to the ground. And for the first time in her long, violent life, Veltari didn't know how to rise. Blood for blood. There is a moment when the audience stops being entertained and starts being changed. In the arena of Kazreen, that moment had come. The crowd, once roaring with bloodlust and laughter, now sat frozen, breath held, eyes wide. This was no longer a spectacle. It was a reckoning. Veltari lay on the arena floor, one arm limp, her breathing ragged. Her jaw throbbed with pain. The world tilted in and out of focus, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a warrior. She felt hunted. She tried to rise again, muscles screaming in protest, pride driving her beyond what her body could take. Her claws dug into the sand-covered steel, leaving streaks behind as she forced herself to her knees. Dax didn't stop her. He stood just a few feet away, chest heaving from effort, blood drying across his ribs and face. One eye was nearly swollen, shut. His stance was crooked from the impact he'd taken earlier, but there was no weakness in it, only certainty. He wasn't watching her with anger or triumph. He was watching her like a man finishing something he never wanted to begin. Veltari coughed blood and spat it at the floor. "Why won't you just fall?" she rasped. Dax tilted his head slightly. "You don't get it, do you? I already did. That's the difference between us." He took a slow step toward her, his voice rising just enough for the crowd to hear. "You've built your whole life around never falling, around winning every fight, crushing everyone weaker than you." He paused. "But that's not strength. That's fear." Her eyes burned, not from pain, but from something far worse. Humiliation. This wasn't how the story was supposed to end. She was Veltari the Unbroken, a legend, a symbol of the Dominion's power. And now, here, before a silent crowd, she was on her knees before a human, and he hadn't even killed her yet. Dax walked toward her slowly, carefully, not as a man enjoying his advantage, but as one preparing to bury something sacred. "I don't want your death," he said. "I want your memory." She blinked, confused. "What?" "I want you to remember this," he said. "I want you to remember what it felt like to lose. Not because you were outmatched in strength, but because you misunderstood who you were facing. You thought we were beneath you, that we'd roll over. Die quiet." He leaned down, meeting her gaze. "But we're not prey. We're the storm that follows the silence." And then he struck. It wasn't wild, it wasn't angry, it was precise. A fist into her gut, deep enough to drive out her breath. Strike to her throat, just enough to shut off her scream, and a final hammer fist across the face, sending her collapsing fully to the ground, gasping, beaten, not dead, but defeated. The crowd, thousands strong, made no sound, not a cheer, not a chant. Just awe, because they knew they had witnessed something different. This wasn't a warrior being overthrown. This was a symbol being shattered. And Dax didn't bask in it. He didn't raise his arms or bow or shout. He stood over her like a gravestone. The arena drone hovered low again, its voice sharp and mechanical. Combat concluded. Victory. Terran warrior. Dax Mercer. Still the human said nothing. He turned from Veltari and began walking toward the gate he had entered from, leaving his blood, her pride, and the crowd's silence behind him. But just before exiting, he paused. He looked back at her one last time, and his final words were quiet, but amplified through the arena by the drone's still-hot mic. "No empire lasts forever, not when humans remember what you did to them." Then he was gone, and the blood he left behind on the arena floor wasn't just his. It was hers. It was the Dominion's. It was the beginning of something they would never be able to unsee. Legacy long after Dax Mercer had vanished through the arena gate. The silence held. It lingered in the air like smoke after a fire, heavy and haunting. Spectators didn't move. Warriors from every corner of the galaxy sat frozen in their seats. The blood on the arena floor, both red and black, shimmered under the lights like a warning carved into stone. The fight was over, but its meaning was just beginning to ripple. Veltari had not died that day. No. Dax had denied her that mercy. What he gave her instead was something far more lasting: memory. The kind that clings to you in the dark. The kind that wakes you from sleep. The kind that reshapes worlds. She had been humiliated, yes, broken in front of billions. Her claws had drawn blood, but her arrogance had drawn something deeper, the attention of an entire species that had, until now, remained underestimated. She was carried from the arena by her own soldiers, not as a champion, not even as a warrior, as a message. And that message traveled fast. Within hours, every known system had replayed the fight. Holograms of Dax's strikes were slowed, analyzed, dissected. Scholars debated his techniques. Strategists studied his psychology. Dominion governors issued quiet orders to increase surveillance on human colonies. The Dominion Council met behind closed doors, twice. But there was one thing they all agreed on, spoken only in whispers at first. This was not the end. This was the spark. On the edge of the Orion Gate, human frigates began their patrols with a new posture, silent, focused, no longer reactive. Recruitment on Earth tripled. Veterans, those who had once buried their ghosts, began to resurface. Not for revenge, for preparation. Because now, the illusion had cracked. For centuries, the galaxy had seen humans as inconsistent, curious, fragile, admirable at times, but never terrifying. But Dax Mercer had shown them the part they weren't ready to face. He had shown them what happens when humans are given no choice but to fight back, and they had seen what just one of them could do. Far from the arena, in a dark war room lit only by the glow of star maps, an elder of the Zarn Dominion stood in silence. He had served in 5 campaigns, had led fleets that blackened skies, and yet his hands trembled slightly as he watched the footage loop on the holoscreen. His aide, young and eager, stepped forward. "Shall we prepare a counter-message, sir? Something to remind the galaxy that the Dominion is still—" "No," the elder interrupted softly, eyes locked on the human's final words. "No empire lasts forever, not when humans remember what you did to them." He turned the screen off. "We don't need propaganda," he said. "We need time, somewhere on a quiet hill beneath a Terran sky." Dax Mercer stood alone, watching the stars. He was healed mostly. The bones would mend. The scars had already begun to fade, at least on the outside. But something deeper in him had changed. He hadn't gone to that arena to make history. He had gone because someone had to. Not the diplomats, not the admirals, not the polished faces on alliance screens. Just a man who had seen what was coming and refused to bow to it. A wind passed over the field, carrying the distant hum of a shuttle engine. A child ran by with a toy blaster chasing laughter. Dax smiled faintly. The war hadn't started yet, but the galaxy was no longer asleep. He had woken it, and whatever came next, peace or fire, the stars would remember this day. The day the galaxy laughed at a human, and he made them remember why they should never do it again.